Hello viewers, and welcome yet again to another episode of Dinner Guide. I'm your host Chef Andy, and today we're going to be focusing on soy, which of course is also going to be carrying on into the next 4 episodes of this beautiful week of Soy Month. Now we're going to be beginning the very simple process by introducing the ingredients, and if you're going to be taking notes for this particular recipe, then this is your chance to grab your pen and paper. So from the very end, I've got about 150 grams of some cubed chicken breast. You're also very much allowed to work with some deboned thighs if you're able to work with those too. I've also got about 180 grams of some tofu that's been cubed into 1-inch cubes. You're also going to require some red and yellow bell pepper, some lettuce which you're going to just be using to aid you into plating. You'll also require 1 medium-sized red onion. You'll also require some garam masala, some curry powder, and some dried oregano, some paprika powder, some cumin powder, and some mushroom-infused soy sauce. This is basically going to give it a bit of color and flavor. And last but not least, some mustard, which we'll be using to flavor up the lettuce. And last but not least, about 3 to 4 pieces of wooden bamboo skewers. But before we get to that part, do take this chance to refresh, and we'll catch you after a very short break. Welcome back viewers. If you're just catching up, very simple recipe for today. We're going to be focusing particularly on soy, which is basically the beautiful ingredient that's on the annual calendar. This falls particularly on this week, and this is basically what we're going to be focusing on. Now very simply, we're going to begin by marinating our mixture. And for that, very important to always have some parchment paper. This you will always need to just drain your chicken. So I particularly like to use a very simple technique. Just place a bit of your kitchen paper on the bottom end of your plate and tilt it to one side. And just by allowing it to sit that way for a very short, maybe 3 to 4 seconds, this allows for your liquid to completely be absorbed by the paper towel. And just to finish that off, always also proceed to pat your meat over the top, just to make sure to get rid of any excess liquid that may be around your meat or any particular traces of blood. Right, so once that's done, proceed to add that to a mixing bowl. And now we're going to proceed to add the rest of our dried ingredients, beginning with my curry powder, my garam masala, and I'm using about a teaspoon for each of this. This particularly gives it a nice, beautiful balance, and it allows for you to really be able to taste all the ingredients without, of course, particularly over seasoning or overpowering one of the particular flavors. So next up, paprika powder, and last but not least, some nutmeg. And this we're going to proceed to mix through very gently with a spoon. Always begin by mixing your rub dry. This particularly allows for the meat to really absorb the flavor really quickly. And be sure to also turn your bowl around a few times as you continue to mix, just to always ensure nice evenness right through. And as I mentioned in the beginning part of the show, if you missed out on the introduction, I'm working with chicken breast for this recipe. You are also allowed to work with any deboned pieces of meat, particularly the thigh bone. This will very much give you a nice, beautiful texture to work with. And it will also save you quite a chunk of money while purchasing. Right, so meat is seasoned. We're going to allow that to just rest on the side very briefly. And next up, we're going to proceed to prepare some of the ingredients that we're going to be using to assemble our skewer. So very, very simple. Proceed to take one of the wedges off your yellow bell pepper, and you can reserve that. And we're going to be doing the same thing for the red bell pepper. Take a nice generous wedge off the edge. And for this, we're going to proceed to begin by just leveling it out. And this is very simple. Just turn it onto the skin side, press it over the board, and you should be able to get rid of those disturbing corner pieces that you always try and figure out what to do with. But remember, these are also usable for any particular processes in relation to making maybe a filling or making a salsa. You can be able to chop those really finely. So we're going to reserve those as well. And very simply proceed to slice your yellow bell pepper lengthways and just split into about 3 equal pieces of about 1 inch to 1.5 inches in size. And proceed to do the same thing with the red pepper, slicing just twice and having a nice bit of chunk there. Very important to mention as well, always try and even out the sizes. This allows for your skewer to have a nice, beautiful appearance and allows for a nice, even coloring and cooking. Now, also to mention, we've got some tofu here, which I'll also be seasoning very, very briefly with a bit of some soy sauce. So you can proceed to rub those very, very gently in the plate, turning them very gently. This you should be able to acquire at your regular retail stores. So one particular thing I can share with tofu, very good alternative for vegetarian cooking, very good alternative as well for cholesterol-free or fat-free meals. It's a very beautiful addition to your diet as well if you're looking for that kick of protein. And last but not least as well, it actually is a derivative from beans, so very, very good as well for your system, and a very good alternative to having meat instead of, a good alternative to having meat on your skewers. And this will also cook very, very gently and very, very easily on a barbecue. So feel free to try some of this out at home. It's always a very, very good alternative to have something different from meat on your barbecues or your weekend burnouts every now and then. So very simply, we're going to proceed to assemble our skewer. But before we get there, just proceed to half a red onion. And this we're going to slice once more into quarters. And you're going to simply proceed to just detach those slices of your onion. Of course, using the nice biggest bits that are easy to acquire from the outer shell of the onion. And that should give you some nice, beautiful, even sizes. And you can also proceed to discard the rest or reserve it to use for something else later. All right, so very, very simple process of making your skewer. One particular tip I always like to use is always have a bit of onion right at the end. Remember, this always helps for you to be able to hold your skewer upright, allows for you to pour your sauce over your skewer without actually having it dripping right over your hands. So this is a very, very simple tip. And you can proceed to do that for just about 2 pieces. And next up, we're going to begin by adding our tofu. So I'm going to proceed to assemble my skewers in unison, of course doing the same thing for each piece. Proceed to add your yellow bell pepper and proceed to add your tofu chunks once more. Now, one particular thing that most of you may not also be able to find out from your recipes that you may be able to find online, Tofu is a very, very good substitute for some of you who are battling as well with illnesses like gout. So if you are looking for something that, okay, this may not particularly be able to substitute your liking and your appreciation for meat, let alone the flavor, but in the long run, it will save you quite a bit of advantage in that it is actually a very good recommended alternative for having meat in your dish. It does carry some nice, beautiful quantities of protein in it. And just to mention, it also has some very beautiful properties as an additional ingredient to your cooking. Right, so we've got our two beautiful skewers assembled. We're going to just discard the rest here to put them on the side. And now onto a hot griddle, we are going to proceed to grill this. But remember, you are not limited to using a griddle. If you do have a frying pan of any particular kind, non-stick or just a regular stainless steel, you should be able to fry them very easily. But one particular advantage of having this particular pan for this process is the beautiful char marks you'll actually be able to gain. So very simply, we're going to proceed to add those to our griddle. And remember this, as this particular ingredients have not really been coated in any oil, so very importantly, finish off by drizzling just a little bit of oil over the top. And the oil will actually allow for the heat to permeate a little nicer, allows for a nice, beautiful, even coloring of the dish, and it will actually cushion the cooking as you proceed. Now for the remaining bits of your tofu, you can proceed to assemble a few more pieces if you still have a bit of mixture remaining. So I'm going to begin once more by adding my onion. And we're going to just proceed to add our chunks of tofu. And we will somewhat do the same thing as we did for the first process, alternating the peppers in between the skewers. Proceed to add your tofu, always making sure not to waste any of your ingredients. Proceed to add a bit of your yellow bell pepper as well. Top up with a bit of tofu once more just to finish off. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my very simple technique of making some soy chicken skewers. Remember, you do have some chicken here as well, so we're also going to be using this, and I'll be grabbing a fresh skewer at the end here, and we're going to proceed to assemble the same thing with a bit of the chicken. We'll be able to cook them off, and we're also going to be taking a break. But when we do come back, I'm going to be showing you one of the simple ones that we did with the tofu, and I'll also be showing you the same thing that we'll have done with the chicken once it's beautifully marinated, which will bring us to the last and final part of the show, which is the plating. But don't touch that dial. We'll see you in a very little bit. Welcome back, viewers. If you're just tuning in, we've been working on this very, very simple to make tofu skewers. Remember, we are very much on that beautiful season of using tofu and soy ingredients, which is basically my focus for the show today. And now this I've been cooking for a little bit, and we are basically ready to remove this from our pan. So I'm just going to grab this big bowl here and just allow them to sit on the side. And in the meantime, we'll proceed to add our other skewers. As I mentioned, we are making some chicken and tofu skewers with the influence of soy. So I've managed to be able to make you two different varieties, which you'll be able to look at when we proceed to plate. So for this, I will begin by drizzling just a bit of oil over the top. And the oil as well, always make sure for you to get a nice beautiful color. And it also allows for the heat to penetrate your skewers and your chunks of meat or vegetable very, very gently, allowing for a nice beautiful process of coloring. So while those proceed, you're going to proceed to grab your lettuce. This we're going to be chopping up very, very finely. So very simply begin by halving one medium to large size of iceberg lettuce. And you're going to very simply proceed to slice that as thin as you possibly can. Of course, with the use of a sharp knife, it's much easier to do so. So proceed to do so right up until you've got about a quarter of your lettuce sliced thinly. And as you proceed to slice, of course, begin to progressively turn your piece of lettuce to the side. That should allow for you to get a nice beautiful trim. Right, so we're going to be using about half of that. We're going to reserve that on the side. All right, now to this very simple process, very important to always season your salad or any particular lettuce leaves or any particular vegetables that you will be serving raw. Remember, dressing your vegetables is also one very simple technique of flavoring your salad. So proceed by moving your lettuce onto a plate. And to that we will begin by seasoning very, very lightly with some salt. This of course always aids also in getting rid of any excess water from your lettuce. We're also going to add a small dash of some soy sauce. We're going to add about a teaspoon of some mustard. I'm using American Dijon mustard for this recipe. And of course, a small drizzle of some olive oil. And all you're going to do with this is toss it very, very gently in your plate. Of course, turning your plate around as you do so. And proceed to toss and turn right up until most of your lettuce leaves are coated in that beautiful mustard and soy. And particularly adding a bit of salad to any skewers or any particular starter options that you may be going with this particular month of April holidays. A nice salad always complements the dish, always gives it a nice, beautiful, refreshing finish to the flavors, complements the taste of the meal as well. And as well, remember, it's also a very good addition to your meal if you're looking at adding to a bit of health benefits to your dish. This is one particular good option, and as I mentioned, skewers are a particularly good option, especially if you're making starters for your family. Right, now we're going to proceed to turn that over once it's been cooking for about 4 to 6 minutes. And we're going to allow those to proceed to cook for anywhere between 6 to 7 minutes until they're beautifully colored all the way around, till the vegetables are nicely colored as well. And the tofu is now nice and crispy, the chicken is cooked through, and we're going to proceed to plating. But before we do so, I will be taking you into another very short break, but when we do come back, I'll take you through the last and final process of plating. Don't touch that dial, we'll be right back. Welcome back, viewers. If you're just tuning in with the show, we've just been finishing off this beautiful tofu skewers. And now we're right about ready to take out our chicken skewers that have been cooking now for about 10 minutes. So we're just going to give them a nice final toss. And we're going to proceed to remove them from the heat and rest them very, very briefly on this very small board of mine. And you can turn off your heat at this stage. Right now, very, very simply, we're going to begin the process by spreading out our dressed lettuce onto the plate. So I'm going to begin by moving that using a pair of tongs. Remember, very important to always keep your work surface and your cooking ethic very clean. Always try and avoid using your hands where you don't need to. And by using tongs, this will particularly aid you in doing so very, very simply. Right, so once your lettuce is on the board, on your plate, you can proceed now to move your vegetable skewers with the tofu to one side of the plate. And you can lay those right over each other. And last but least, you can also proceed to plate your skewers with the chicken on one end of the plate. Of course, always making sure not to mix any vegetarian dishes with meat dishes, especially if you do have someone with a bit of a food allergy. But that particular plating should actually work for you. Remember, you're not limited as well to plating as we did on the show. You can proceed to also try your very own simple techniques from your very own home kitchen. So we're going to bid you farewell, which brings us to the last part, and we're going to also remind you to also check out some of the previous work we've done on our YouTube page, which is BrandPlus TV. And you can also be able to air out your comments, queries, or any particular issues pertaining the show. We're always more than welcome to hear it from you. But for now, we're going to bid you farewell, wishing you a lovely, beautiful April holidays. And for those of you who are also looking at some new techniques of working with soy, I believe this one may particularly work for some. So thank you once again. God bless and see you soon.